Gets away from Kante, plays down the line for Suarez. 98 team of the year, Suarez.
Here's a big chance.
Ramos.
Suarez, what's he going to do? Tries to feed it back. Is that going to come to Ronaldo? Just trying to get a foot on that, maybe. Pull it now. The man that Bullock loves. Half turn there from Torres. Vieira back to Suarez on the finesse, and there we have it. The Bullock is in London. He turns around. He celebrates. The Bullock. He had a plan, and he's performed it.
You're listening to the FUT Champions Podcast with Richard and Brandon.
What is going on? Welcome back to a brand new podcast. Week 8 now of the FUT Champions Podcast. We're back for another week. Another week of eSports has passed. Another week of FUT Champs and Weekend League has gone by. First of all, before we start this episode, a big thank you for the response we got actually on that Kurt podcast, one of our favourite ones to do so far as well. We nearly hit 1,000 views on YouTube, and as I said before, I think we've worked out that we're hitting at least 1,000 viewers each week, which is fantastic for us, especially since we've only been launched from November. So a big thank you on that one. So if you do want to get involved in the show at any point, it's at FUT Champs Pod over on Twitter. Obviously you can use the hashtag as well. But back for another week, obviously not just me, that man that's always next to me, Richard Buckley. Hello mate, another week, another podcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, Brandon. Thank you, as Brandon reiterated there. I'm going to say it again. Huge thank you for the support on last week's podcast. We enjoyed it just as much as you did consuming it. Kurt, fantastic guest, and best of luck to him next week in Barcelona. I'm sure we're going to talk about it, but only 1 week away, Brandon.
We are indeed, and lots of things happening in the esports scene at the moment. Obviously, as you know, the Australian League, it's going into esports as well. That was announced a few weeks ago. They've been announcing players recently this week and going into February, of course. As Richard said, Barcelona's coming up, the big FUT Champions event #1, and another big league that has gone into esports, which our guest will come into shortly. But also, we have our pundit on who's here every week as well, FIFA team manager at Roma and Fnatic, Colin. Welcome back for another week.
I'm excited. We're getting to the real meat and potatoes of the FIFA competitive season now, and can't wait to see who comes out and who truly is the best FIFA player in the world.
Indeed, indeed, and of course, Poacher's going to be there, isn't he, Colin? Is he? Can you feel the nerves in him yet, or do you feel he's quite confident?
No, we're cool. We're cool. We're calm. We have boot camp starts in 4 days. We'll be doing a 3 or 4 day boot camp before Barcelona, and usually that puts us in a pretty good mindset going into the actual event. So yeah, that starts in 3 days in London at our Fnatic bunker, and then we'll roll straight into Barcelona.
That sounds really good indeed. And of course, Richard, I'm sure you can introduce our guest. We're never joined just us three. We've always got a top 100 pro or a FIFA pro on every week. Who have we got this week, Richard?
Yeah, big congratulations and welcome to the FUT Champs podcast. Mike LaBelle, I believe I said that correctly. Brand new FIFA player for the brand new up and coming eMLS. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. No, I'm excited to be here, and it's pretty cool that we're starting to see a little more development within different nationalities, or I shouldn't say nationalities, but different nations are starting to build out their leagues. You got things happening in the Bundesliga, you've got things happening in Holland, you have things happening in France, of course, and now in the US. Very
big indeed, and obviously New York Red Bulls, you're the official player. It was only announced in the last week. Talk to me about that move. You know, how I know these moves take a long time to come, and Colin will come on to that after. You know, how long have you been talking about this move for?
So the New York Red Bulls and I have been speaking a lot for, I'd say, months leading up to this, in terms of what it looks like, what our visions are, what your goals are in terms of being a competitive player, a content creator, and then how does that parallel with the league, and how does that parallel with the organization? Do you guys want to create content? Do you want to base things around FIFA and football, or soccer in this case? We're talking about the MLS, and what does that kind of look like?
And obviously, you used to be at hashtag. Obviously, you left there. Was that always the intention to move to American club, or was it just, you know, fancy something fresher at the time?
Well, I think with hashtag United, Spencer wanted to focus on Europe because it made the most sense for him in terms of activations. He had a lot more control with deliverables, and he could activate the players. Hey, we're going to be playing here, or hey, I'm going to be doing something at Sky Sports. I'm going to be doing something with this network, etc. But a lot of those things that people think take a lot of time, and they're really planned out and they're months ahead. That's not how it works at all. They often happen days before, or even the day of. Sometimes they're just like, hey, we want to be a part of this trend or this bandwagon here, or we want to do something with gamers, we want to do something with football. And obviously I would not be able to take part in some of those activations. And of course, I also have always worked on the North American side of esports and really promoting not just esports, but trying to grow esports where I'm from, because that's what I've wanted to see. I've been a part of the community now for almost 10 years in terms of being a pro player or being involved in the competitive scene.
And linking back to that as well, I'm sure Colin comes to this as well. First of all, Colin, talk to me about, we said about maybe in a few podcasts before, when you want to sign a player, a lot of these clubs now are going to be signing players shortly, especially the eMLS, the A-League, and maybe even the Premier League in the future. How long do these moves take to come about?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the availability and kind of the expectation when it comes to a certain player. I think I've mentioned in the past, like certain players' deals have taken weeks just because of the maybe because of the situation, or because of certain deadlines, or maybe a certain event that you want them to be under your banner for. But most kind of clubs that do it the best, in my opinion, usually take a couple months to do it, to kind of vet out the player, feel out the player, really see if they fit in with kind of the vision of your organization, and kind of the values match up, kind of like Mike mentioned. So yeah, it usually takes a couple months, and then you can kind of really figure out like who that right player is, especially if you're only going to have one or two players, like a lot of these eMLS clubs are going to have. They definitely should take their time when choosing these players, because these are players that are going to represent them for months, if not years, in the future. So, you need to make sure that you're making the right decision.
And Colin spoke about it just then, Mike. I want to get your opinion on it. You've been competing, as you said, for 10 years at the highest level in competitive FIFA. Going into a tournament like Barcelona, Colin said the Roma guys are going to do a boot camp. What would your preparation be like going into a big tournament?
I think it's important to make sure that you're ready for different scenarios, but to also try to replicate how you're playing from home. So however you've been practicing, it's very important to not make last-minute changes, in my opinion, when you go into pro events, because a lot of it's going to come down to comfort and also what you've built into your gameplay instinctively. So if you go changing formations last minute, that's typically going to go poorly for you. And that's kind of how I always try to prepare, is to try to really make sure that everything that I'm doing is very crisp with how I've been practicing, how I've been playing, how did I qualify for this event, and then also read the rules. Please read the rules, because I know that Barcelona, they didn't really announce a lot until kind of last minute in terms of, are there going to be restrictions, are there not going to be restrictions. But I've noticed from doing a lot of these different events that people assume, oh, it's going to be this or it's going to be that, and it doesn't always go that way. Sometimes there's a definite camera view, and you got to remember, I go back to where people didn't get to play on their own console and their own screen. So if there was a set camera view for that tournament, you better know how to play at that camera view, because at home when you're online, you can practice however you'd like to practice. And that's really big for preparation. And then as much LAN experience as you can get is always going to be beneficial. I really wish that in the FIFA community we had a lot more in terms of events. I think that's still what's kind of holding us back for esports, is the amount of events and then the definites of events. And what I mean by definite is, I have no idea each year, even as somebody that's involved in the community, how many events are we really going to have? Are there going to be 10? Are there going to be 15? Are there going to be 3? Are there going to be 4 that you could actually attend, that you could actually qualify for? You need a schedule, a calendar of events.
And a point to make on that as well, we've got an absolute list we can go into here. First of all, Mike, I know me and Richard talk about it a lot when we commentate as well, the difference from playing out in the comfort of your own home, you're playing your 40 games a weekend, to go into that LAN event, with obviously in an arena like the one that's going to be in Barcelona. The difference there. Talk to me about that. Obviously, you've played in a few LAN events yourself. How quickly did it take for you to adapt to the different conditions at a LAN event than being at home?
So for me, and I can only speak from my opinion and in my perspective and what works for me as an advantage, I really liked the old school vibe of gaming, where you stood next to your opponent. You sat right next to your opponent and you guys could make some noise, you could talk, you could interact. The crowd was often behind you, and they were also sometimes nice, sometimes not so nice. But I kind of liked that energy and that feel, that involvement. It felt like a true spectator sport. and right now we've made it a much more professional, which can be looked at kind of as with a double-edged sword, where yes, everything is going to be very clean. People are not going to have any of, I guess, the issues of maybe some negative interaction. You're not going to have crazy crowds, blowing up everything that's happening. But I think it's great from a viewer's perspective, a consumer's perspective, to have that, and then to have some rivalries, some built up back and forth. Right now, especially considering that everyone's going to be representing an organization at some point, and Colin probably agrees with me here. So then from that point, it's what do you do beyond just representing that organization? And then also, are you concerned about maybe saying something wrong because you do represent them? So you never want to point or present your organization that's helping you with this dream and progression. You don't want to represent them in the incorrect manner. So when they have you on a mic, everybody's always very politically correct, from my opinion, from watching interviews and doing everything along those lines. Where I would have loved to see the FIFA community kind of transition or follow the trend of the fighting game community. Have you ever watched a Capcom versus or Marvel vs. Capcom or a Street Fighter, Killer Instinct, Mortal Kombat, you name it? That community, sometimes I don't care about the game or the results. I just can't wait to see how these guys go back and forth with each other, or how the crowd will clearly favor somebody. And it's just really fun to watch as a viewer, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're totally right there when it comes to kind of like the sanitization almost of competitive FIFA in a lot of ways, because I definitely think there's a reason that Kurt can say things that, say, Poacher couldn't, right? And that's not because maybe they wouldn't say the same things. It's just because of the organizations. It's definitely, you kind of have to tone it down in a lot of ways, because at the end of the day, like if one of our players makes a mistake, it goes on the front page of AS Roma esports player says this or does this, or is involved in this kind of confrontation or something. Whereas if another player does it, it's not really newsworthy for the general media to really pick up on.
No, I completely understand the kind of the dilemma there, where it's like, you want to make very non-traditional and entertaining content, right? And entertaining media. Like, Kurt is one of the most interesting professional players to follow. But you never know what he's going to do, and that's kind of what makes him interesting. Other than you can almost guarantee that he's going to brag on himself.
Exactly.
You can almost guarantee that he's going to say something positive, reassuring, like how good he is as the best player with his little accent and everything. But Kurt's a fun guy, man. I like him a lot, and I think he's good for the community. He's going to fill a definite role there. Like, anytime they take a chance and interview Kurt, you never know what he's going to say, but you can almost guarantee EA's not going to like it.
Yeah.
You spoke about the audience in other games playing a factor. I know me and Brandon can comment on this. Early on last year, we went to the Zigawee battle in Amsterdam, and it was actually at the Amsterdam Arena, and that was one of the only events where we've actually seen a crowd play such a big part, because in Amsterdam, Ajax Danny made it to the final. The crowd loved him. He was getting cheered. They were encouraging him on. Hashtag Tassu, who was in the final with him, got booed out of the building. And it was just it was a dilemma that you wouldn't expect to see a hashtag player getting booed so heavily. And in the end, Danny beat him over the course of the 2 legs. So maybe the crowd does play a part. Have you had anything like that in the past, Mike, where someone said something?
Absolutely. But see, I like, not that I want to have the crowd against me, but I like the crowd being involved. That's how sports are to me. When I consume sports, part of that experience is the atmosphere, and that's something that I'd love to have welcomed back into competitive gaming. Right now, FIFA at least has gotten so professional in terms of the production and just how they have all the rules, everything set up, that you lost that feel of organic emotion that I was so accustomed to seeing for probably my first 7 or 8 years in the competitive scene, where I mean, things happened that I'm almost 100% sure would not fly. Like, if you've ever seen Madden tournaments, because I competed a little bit of Madden back in the day in NHL, some of the things they would say to each other, I was like, we're going to have to step outside after this. Like, pause the game. Because it was just so disrespectful. Like, I was at a Madden event where these 2 guys were playing, and one of the guys had his girlfriend next to him, right? The other guy was talking negative about his girlfriend to all of them. Like, this was involved in the game. So it was like calling his girlfriend ugly while they're playing a game of Madden. And I'm not saying that that's what we want to build towards. It's probably not. But I'm just saying, like, the level of disrespect that was accepted in that community was unbelievable. When I played a couple tournaments, I was like, this is nuts. That they are, like, like, where are the lines? right? But I remember in FIFA, like I played in 2008, I won the FIFA Interactive World Cup, the North American qualifier. I would say that as many people that were there were actually Mexican, as is equaled out to Americans. So we have so many Mexican Americans. So in the final or the semifinals, I played against Zaracero, who I think he got third in a FIFA Interactive World Cup, maybe twice at the World Final. So very well known if you know your history of that tournament. And I beat him in the semifinals, but I remember the whole crowd was Mexico, Mexico, Mexico. You know, they were all definitely in his corner, and that's fine. But I just think it's an interesting dynamic that I would love to see a little more like embraced going forward. Or like when people play next to each other, then it makes it where maybe you could beat some of the likes of some of these guys that are the best nerd. Maybe they're the best at going 40-0, or they're able to even bring a really great package to tournaments, but because it's so quiet and not going to be interactive, they never feel uncomfortable. And I think it would be cool to have, you know, a little bit of talking back and forth. Like when I went to penalty kicks, for example, we would talk, we would interact sometimes during penalty kicks, like, oh, I got that, right? Or even during the game, because you could hear each other, you're there. Yeah. There's no if and or what about it. You guys are right next to each other, it's going to happen. And the same with the crowd. But that might be something that would be, you'd have to open up to a debate. I wonder what the people would say, but for me, I'd love to see that come back, because I just think that's more the future of esports, as opposed to the super professional
production
sitting
side of
the sitting 10 feet across from each other. You know, like all you're gonna see me do is maybe raise my hand if you're an opponent of mine.
Yeah. When it comes to, and I think that's what excites me a little bit about this new season, is I feel like it's being slightly geared away from the production side. I still think the production is definitely going to be there, but when you look at, just for example, the venue that's been booked out for the Barcelona event, it's a 17,000 person capacity arena. And I'm not saying that we're going to fill that arena, but if we can get, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7, 800, 1,000 people there, that's going to be an environment that we haven't really seen when it comes to this new age of FIFA, you know, where all of this money's here and you have all these big clubs. I think it'll definitely bring a different vibe completely to this to these events. And then again with Gfinity, with the Elite Series, you know, that's a 200, 300 person arena that is going to be jam-packed every single time with people yelling and supporting their teams. I think we're getting a little bit further away from the production side, because if you look at all the other big esports, yeah, they have great production, but they also have massive crowds. And I feel like even if it is just a couple hundred people, just having that environment and having the players get more accustomed to that kind of stuff and get a little bit more excited, because it's kind of hard to get hyped when, you know, it's just you and your manager there. And, you know, you're in a studio. You know, it's much harder to kind of get hyped. And I think they did a better job as the season went on when it came to regionals and stuff like that, as they started letting more and more people in. When you saw like the different European and Americas regionals, you know, maybe there's 50 people there, but there's a massive difference between 50 people and like 1,000 people cheering you on. So hopefully we're gearing ourselves a little bit more towards that crowd centered and building those environments.
And to put this for perspective for you guys, so when I'm playing these qualifiers, these tournaments that there's probably 128 people at a lot of them, or maybe 64 people. This depends if you had the qualifier, if it's kind of a show or go for whether it was World Cyber Games, FIFA Interactive World Cup, Electronic Sports World Cup. You can name the event. But in the past, we're talking about hundreds of people being there. So you're already playing at a bigger audience than what happens now. And just so people at home understand, because a lot of people watch these tournaments, and I don't think they don't get to see necessarily what's exactly around. They don't necessarily understand that the only people that are allowed to be on the actual like gaming area of these events is the players. And that's only if you are playing. If you're not playing, a lot of times you can't just walk in there and be around. And in the referees, pretty much, the administrators. So there is nobody else that's there to put any sort of pressure, to be behind somebody. It's very separated, almost like you're roped off into a big studio, kind of as Colin was saying. And that's great for production, but yeah, you don't have this direct interaction that could play a major part. You don't have like away fans or home fans. You have no fans. And then they would bring in the big group of people for the final. But I think like all the matches should look how the final looks in terms of people being back and forth and yelling and talking and doing a little bit of everything.
A point to take on that as well. I think like that's a definite factor. And you know, you look at CS:GOs and stuff, and the production side is still there. I know, and that the teams are split. But the thing that obviously does make it is the crowd. I know that FIFA's obviously been as you've probably seen it a lot longer than I have, Mike, and you've seen it grow of different tournaments, different prize pots and stuff like that. The thing that they will hopefully grasp, and it will come, as Colin was saying, the potential for this year is to engage fans to come out and watch these events, because I feel like for a number of years there's always been the casual player compared to the competitive player, and since FUT Champs has come in, a lot of those casual players now are looking at the game in a competitive manner.
I think the only thing that potentially could be not holding FIFA back in terms of the gameplay or the presentation, but in terms of getting big audiences in, is because there's only a handful of players who are superstars to an audience, if you get what I mean. For example, looking at a game like Call of Duty, people will come not to almost watch the Call of Duty, but to potentially get a photo with an Optic Scump or a Crim6 or someone of that nature. I think what we want to be doing is looking at the people who are playing FIFA at the very top, the likes of I don't know, for example, Gorilla. Are people coming to watch Gorilla play, or they're coming to watch the competition? I think that's what you need to be questioning.
Well, there's just not entertainment value yet. That's what we're missing. Like, we have a competitive. Go ahead.
A point to make on that. I think this could be a point for you, and especially for you, Mike. Obviously, if you come up against New York City, do you feel like where the clubs have come in it now, and you've got players representing clubs with rivalries, could that bring what we've been missing?
Potentially. It just really depends how the event's set up. Like I said, I think you need to see some crowd interaction. You need to see some interaction between the players. Right now, you see no interaction between players. Like when you see somebody celebrate a goal, they're zooming in on that person celebrating by himself. Like, you're not next to the guy that you're celebrating, that you're happy about. So it doesn't really involve the other player. You just go on to the next moment of the game. And I think you can capture some of the best memes and the best replay value moments of competitive events are how players talk about other players and how they interact with other players. In my opinion, when I watch back pro events, I'm watching because I know this dude's getting heated and I can't wait to see what he's going to do. Or to see somebody battle back, that competitive spirit. But everybody has their own way of viewing gaming, but I definitely think that entertainment side is missing. Because we could take Gorilla, for example. Gorilla is the largest reach, I think, of any competitive player in FIFA right now. Is that a safe? Is that a safe statement? I think he's got, like, what, 500,000 subscribers very quickly. He's always on the podium for events. He would be considered your superstar, right?
Yeah.
But you're not going to see him yell or celebrate or even give interviews where he really gives you a lot to go off of in terms of really getting to know this guy way beyond gaming. Like when you compared to maybe a Scump or who else did you say?
A Nade Shot, for example. Someone of that.
Nade Shot. Yeah, everybody knows everything about Nade Shot, And that's where you go from being popular or being really great at a game to being, I think, a superstar. Is when people want to know what's your day-to-day life, what's happening with you, not just how to get better at FIFA.
And I just want to speak to Mike about, obviously, I know you said it in the YouTube video, you don't know everything about the hashtag eMLS yet, but as an overview and stuff, when did you know that this kind of project was going to launch this year?
I was waiting on the press release just like everyone else, and if we're going off the press release, which I think is what we should go off of because these are definites, we have an event here that's going to happen at PAX East. That's a definite. That's where this tournament's going to take place. But in terms of details beyond that, I haven't seen anything beyond the same things that you guys have read.
Because it seems really interesting as well, as we've seen this whole global series this year, and obviously there's Barcelona in a week's time, and there's another event in April, and then Gfinity is going to be along there somewhere. Then we've got the eMLS, and still after that there's still about 80 spots. There's about maybe 70, 80 spots left for players to qualify for the playoffs in the middle. So I honestly don't know what else is gonna come out of the woodworks.
I wouldn't be able to say. We could all speculate, I suppose. I hope they have more in their plans because I remember speaking with EA last year, and for me last year we were talking directly to EA employees, and they said, look, the following year you're not gonna have to go. This is what they told me. So this is why I was like kind of surprised this year. They said, look, you're not gonna have to go 40-0 next year. We're gonna set up a lot more with qualifications and LAN events, and we want you guys to have more room for error, so to speak. So a disconnection doesn't ruin, your entire chance of qualifying. But it couldn't be farther from the truth for this year. So that makes me wonder, like, well, I wonder what changed. because that's what the
Gfinity is the only thing at the moment that you can base that off at the moment, because obviously Gfinity is just online cups that will qualify you through. But obviously, if you are a pro already, obviously it's quite difficult because it's a drafting system there. But I just don't know when these events are going to come out of the works as well, because obviously time is ticking on, and I'm thinking around that May area could be where a lot of things happen. I don't know about you, Colin.
Yeah, I think I've always said this from the first episode, but I think the thing I'm really excited for is when we're going to get roped into like the DreamHacks and the ESLs and the PGLs and all of like these different major tournaments where we'll be kind of put alongside Counter-Strike and kind of the other bigger esports in general. I think that's what really excites me, because then you already have that crowd that, you know, since FIFA is so wide appealing, like a fan that comes and maybe between Counter-Strike matches is like, oh, FIFA's happening as well, let's go watch that. And I think that's where you're going to be able to get more esports transfer from like existing esports fans to come over and like pay attention a little bit to FIFA. And I think building up the storylines and stuff like that is something that we're still learning how to do, and we're still trying to develop. I think a couple of really good rivalries would definitely help. Like one of my favorite moments of last year was when Sheehan didn't shake Tass's hand. Like that for me was like drama. Yes, finally, like something interesting is happening, and like there might actually be a bit of needle between certain players, and that's what really excites me, is like those types of moments and kind of the drama coming into it a bit, because I think that's what really builds up a lot of other esports too, is like the Optic versus FaZe matchups, right? Like those players like genuinely hate each other, and you know they get so excited when they beat each other, because that almost means more than winning the event. It's like, oh well, as long as we like place higher than them, right? And that's what I think we're trying to develop, but once again with the sanitization, with the slight sanitization of like certain parts of it, it's kind of harder to like build up those rivalries. But yeah, I don't know. We'll just have to see how it works out.
Yeah, I would describe that as the takeaway moments. And a lot of the FaZe versus Optic matchups are the takeaway moments from the event. What you're going to talk about weeks later or a month later. And kind of like what you're saying with the sanitization and what I've said, I think we have the cleanest cut community I've ever seen for like competitive gaming. And that's where you have to get people with like a little more rigidness. Let me give you some examples, because so I was at the Virgin Gaming, the World Final for Virgin Gaming, and this must have been 2011, 2012. And I'm playing a match. I'm playing against a Spanish pro. And I remember a couple other Spanish pros were watching them play. And remember, we're all right next to each other. And they're talking negatively about me in Spanish. So I paused the game and I was like, they gotta go. But so on video, this would look great, but you'd never see it because this is in 2011, 2012. But I was like, look, those guys gotta go, unless I can send somebody over there to talk to them. You know, like, let me get a trash talker as well, you know? But it was good for the whole interaction of it. They're like, what's happening here, you know?
Yeah.
And that's something that we just don't have any of this type of back and forth. And like, I don't know, if you get into competitive gaming, usually it's because you're into the competition. And that's why you see so many athletes that get into FIFA or get into NBA 2K or get into Madden, and that's kind of what's driving them. And then when you do this just super professional setup, you lose the competitive drive.
Do you feel like, since you know some of these guys have the YouTube followings and the big Twitter followings, you know, obviously behind some players' backs, they may say this guy's, you know, this and that. Do you feel like they're a little bit worried of their audience if they get seen doing that on a live stream? You know, they might get talked about differently, even though it will make good entertainment.
It depends. Like, it's really easy to make a follow-up saying, hey guys, I know I was a little bit aggressive at this tournament, I just cared about the results. It's not hard. That's all you have to say.
It's
people
your job,
understand. Yeah, but I mean, like, there's been many times where I've seen this happen over and over again. Like, this is a rinse, wash, repeat of people saying, look, you know, I was in the moment, right? How many times have we seen that on TV somewhere? I was in the moment. I got caught in this moment. People forgive and move on, and they understand. They appreciate that you care. Like, if you don't feel nervous, then you don't care. If you don't feel emotion, then you don't care. If you don't react to something, then you don't care. That's how I view it. The reason that you have this is because you want the result, because you care about this matchup, because you want to say, yo, I finished above this person.
And that's why I think one of the biggest moments of last year, too, that was really early on, and I don't think a lot of people remember it, and I think these two were actually really criticized for this, but when Aga and Gorilla got grouped from by Bullock, and Rocky.
Paris.
Both of them left the event, and I don't think came back until the last day. And some people were like, oh, sore loser, sore loser. It's like, no, but like Mike was saying, it's because they care so much and because they have that drive to succeed. Like, that's the reason they didn't want to be there anymore. Because at the end of the day, like, when it comes to esports, like, it's down to you, especially in FIFA. At the end of the day, it's you. It's not your teammates. You know, you don't have, it's not Rocket League where you have 2 other guys, or COD where you have 4 other guys to back you up. Like, no, it's FIFA. It's 1v1. It is all on you. And I think that sometimes it's like kind of nice to see the emotions come out in different ways, whether it is the Amons and the Dannies where, you know, they're shouting at the top of their lungs and getting excited because they're scoring goals, or it's like tears after games like Alexander in I think Vancouver after he got eliminated. You know, there's all these different moments that kind of stick out in my mind, and it's always the extremes of certain emotions. It's never really like or like Shells when he won his event, you know, that was amazing as well because of how excited he got, and it's never really like there's certain events that I don't really remember as well, just because the champion like didn't really seem like he was that happy that he had won the event. So yeah, it's interesting, the kind of the temperaments that are coming into FIFA are definitely a lot more level-headed than in other esports and a lot of other, you know, FPSs and different types of games.
And it comes off in a genuine way, not to cut anyone off. Like, you know, you guys asked about, well, what if there were repercussions? What would happen here? If it's a reaction to something, I think it comes off very genuine. Now, it's one thing if you're like, yo, I'm going to go after your mom or something, okay? You're pushing some lines. You're talking about somebody's family, you know, but like in terms of reactions, like you said, tears, emotion, yelling, screaming, being happy, being sad, you can see it on their face. And I think that's something that we have a lot of room to improve, which will be really exciting. Or even post-game interviews. Like, if you get in there and you ask the right questions, you can get the correct responses or the interesting responses, as opposed to, you know, some of the more politically correct questions that everybody asks. Like, well, what did you think of your gameplay? You know, how about what did you think of your opponent? Yeah.
It's always the best interviews are the ones where you see a little bit that the player didn't want to show you almost. Even in real life football, when an interview asks a question to a manager and that manager reacts, that's what
I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say.
Do you think potentially something that could be holding it back from the more edgy side to the competitions is that the games are 3+, and that the organisers or whoever, FIFA, EA, whoever it might be, want the people consuming it to be less, I can't think of the word, but not harmed potentially, whereas something like a Call of Duty, it's an 18, they know the people's going to be watching it are at an older age bracket.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you reword that in a different way? I just want to make sure that I respond accordingly to what you're trying to address for us.
So, given that FIFA itself is a 3+ and it's open to any age bracket, when you're
watching for everyone.
Yeah, when you're watching these competitions, they need to think about anybody who could potentially be watching it. So they're not going to want players swearing, for example. I remember at the Club World Cup, there was one of the players who was getting very hyped, who was swearing, and they actually had to go and warn him and say, look, you can't be doing this because you are on stream. Given other games, CSGO, Call of Duty, that they are 18+, are the organisers of these events potentially less bothered about edginess from the competitors, swearing, things like that?
I think it's about understanding your community. How well do you understand the people that are consuming the content? Let's look at our biggest content creators. Do they curse? And the answer for pretty much all of them would be yes. There are clean content creators. I really don't curse in my content, but if you catch me on a live stream, every once in a while I get upset just like the next guy. And but I mean, like, let's take the biggest live streamer, Castro. It's probably what, every 10 words probably is maybe an F word.
Yep.
Yeah, he's the biggest guy, the biggest. So it's proven. Let's take the biggest FIFA guy, KSI. There's not a video he has on the internet that he doesn't have at least 15 curse words. So it's like, what is being accepted or consumed from the people that are into FIFA? And I know KSI has kind of crossed over and just become this like massive brand and personality now, but even when he was a FIFA only guy, he was the biggest one.
Yeah.
As well, I think you have to consider that FIFA is a very different esport in that it's the name of the game is an organization that isn't just related to the video game, you know? Like, FIFA has so many different other interests other than FIFA the video game, FIFA the organization. And FIFA has so many different partners that are family friendly at the end of the day. It's McDonald's, it's all of these different brands that are very, like we said earlier, are a bit sanitized and wouldn't really like to identify themselves if the FIFA eWorld Cup was full of a bunch of kids like swearing at each other. And I don't think that's something that they would want to necessarily associate themselves with. And EA is beholden to a higher power, unfortunately, unlike COD or CS, where at the end of the day, the person you're reporting to is the publisher that's developing the game.
Well, also the premise in Call of Duty, or the premise in Counter-Strike, you kill the other team. Like I think that is a very I don't know, a certain type of outlook, in terms of like a even consumer point, as opposed to a sports game where it is like the best thing you could do is score a goal. It's just a little bit I think different in terms of, oh man, look at that sniper shot, look at that long shot, look at that, like that throw, oh he tagged him with a grenade, or oh he hit a lot of nice tiki-taka passing. So I get it. You're absolutely correct. With FIFA has this almost a catch-22, where because FIFA doesn't represent just the video game, but so much more in terms of football, just football in general, that they do have to really reinforce or make sure that they're not allowing people to go too crazy with it. But I think everything should be done in balance.
Everything's good in moderation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where we're trying to find, I guess, your bread and butter. Where is the right place for both professional players to be happy, the developers to be happy, and the consumers to be happy, where they're like, I cannot wait till the next event, as opposed to it being more like, I think everybody's looking forward to Barcelona, but they're looking forward to it because it's one of the only events, if not the only, of this major tournament that you could look forward to consuming. Like if you're into the FIFA scene, this is a big event because there aren't many events, as opposed to it being like a personality type of event, or like I can't wait to see so-and-so play so-and-so. I think when you get to some of the biggest creators, then people want to see those matchups. Maybe like if you had an opportunity to watch Gorilla versus Rocky, I think a lot of people are looking forward to tuning into that, just because those guys carry so much weight, or Dax versus Tass or something along those lines. But for your entertainment value side, I think it's like, I don't know if I'm watching for interviews or watching to learn something about this or that. It's really watching for the gameplay.
I just had one more question too. So last year, the way that EA set up qualifying for these different events has changed massively. Last year it was set up to where the rest of world guys had their own events, the Americas guys had their own events, and then the Europeans had their own events. But now with the global leaderboard, it's definitely changed the way that players qualify. Do you think it's a positive influence? It's just, I'm really interested coming from an Americas pro, because so far we've only really had Europeans on, so I just was curious as to what your impression was. Do you think it's like easier for Americas guys to qualify? Do you think it's harder on you guys? Do you think it's unfair? Like, where do you sit on it?
Well, I definitely think if you're in the European region, it was a big improvement for you. I guess for me as a professional player, or being involved in the competitive scene, I think what I dislike the most right now about qualification is the system. The fact that it's still about avoiding everybody. And if you guys at home that are watching this haven't realized this, or haven't really started thinking a little deeper, it's not possible for all these guys to go 40-0 and 39-1 and play against each other. So it's become a competition of who's the best avoider. And that sucks. As a premise, that's not good.
It's been more of a saying of cherry picking this year, and I don't know why it's come in. It's a bit of a weird one.
But it should be like that's how it's like. It shouldn't be like that. But I'm saying, like, as a professional player, as somebody who wants to qualify for events, you would be out of your mind to try to play Gorilla. You would be crazy to try to match up with these guys. It doesn't benefit either party. It doesn't, because the system is not based on, and I've talked about this on my YouTube channel, but the system is not based on points. It's based on wins. So if it's based on wins, then it should be based on tiers. And what I mean by this is, if you're an elite, like in the elite level, you should play elite players. If you're in gold, you play gold. If you're in silver, you should play silver at those times whenever you're going through the weekend league. Now, if it's based on skill points, which it used to be in the past for these leaderboard-based systems, then if I beat, let's say I beat Colin, and Colin's a bad FIFA player, I get like 2-3 points for that game. If Colin would have beat me, maybe I'd drop 100.
Yep.
So it's not a good, that's really a dangerous move on my end in case Colin's able to slide out of there with a W. However, when I play someone like Tass, maybe I could get 50 points for winning, or he could get 50 points for winning. So it's based actually on the relevance or the competitive level of your opponent, and that's how skill points work. So we have a horrible system. Now to more so go and address your question in terms of, and this is not a shot at EA. I mean, I only am telling you this because I care, once again. Like, I play this game, I consume this game, I put in a lot of time into the title, creating content around the title. And surely, by design, it can't be EA, FIFA, anyone's goal to make it where it is the best. Like the best plan is to avoid pros. That cannot be the goal here. I don't, no matter what perspective you're coming from. Now, in terms of qualification, I do want to see people from all regions qualify. I think what they should have done is maybe increased how many players from Europe, but they should have still left, I think, a certain amount from Western World and a certain amount from the Americas. So maybe like, all right, so based on results from last year, who's doing well at these events? You know, who's performing the best? Who has the most 40-0s, the most 39-1s? And Europe would definitely come up as being the #1 region for that. So sure, maybe they get more spots. So instead of it being, what was it last year, Colin? And it was 16 slots, I think, for the Americas. I think it was 16.
Yeah, I think I think it was 20, and then it was 4-4 and 2-2. I think so. It was like 10 Europeans on Xbox, 10 on PlayStation, and then 4-4 and 2-2. I think is what it was.
So maybe you take away some of the spots from some of the other regions, and they kind of tried to have a split. I know Europe had the most last year, but it wasn't by a lot. Like, I think European players, I think they had maybe 4 more places than the Americas. And then the rest of the world had the least amount of places, I believe, but you know, for the finals especially. Yep. Yeah. So I'd like to see them still have representation from everywhere, but I think that it's more important for them to change the current system at hand. Like, I was shocked coming into FIFA 18 that they didn't, and when I say they, I say EA here, didn't anticipate or adapt to what they learned from FIFA 17, because FIFA 17 was awesome, and people were going to take so much, they're gonna be just happy because we have this new game mode. You could be excited. What the hell, we got the weekend league, this is new, oh my god, you know, like, they're gonna be pumped. I was excited. I was like, okay, this is big news, what's going on? I've never seen a weekend league before. So you take some of the negatives with the positives, and you're going along the learning curve in terms of how the system goes, new rules that are being implemented. If you remember last year when the game came out, they had custom formations were allowed. You could see when someone's club was created, and EA removed these things, so they're listening. But the fact that in FIFA 18 there was no changes, I was just really surprised. And you don't see many pros or hear many pros voice in terms of complaining, because a lot of them are able to qualify based on the current system, but the current system of just beating above average players over and over again and becoming the best above average player beater is not what you want to promote for competition. Not in my opinion, at least.
2 things to just quickly go on that. The latter point, do you think that the people who are potentially just cherry picking their games will be caught out at these events? Like, they will be not exploited, but they'll be exposed? Not
necessarily. Because I think there's people that do really well online that don't always do very well in person. So even though they deserve their position online and they play great from their office or their bedroom or the studio or couch or however they have their place position, they don't always travel well. And then there is the I know this tournament's set up differently, but a lot of times we've gone through very random factors where, like, if you get stuck in a bad group, we talked about or Colin mentioned August, you know, storming out. Like, upset about his results in the tournament.
Start potentially.
Yeah, and let's look at Yvonne, for example. I think Yvonne drew August in both. I think it was multiple events last year that he drew August twice on the PlayStation side of things. And it's like, those guys both very arguably could advance in a different group very easily. But I mean, there is that random aspect, and that's just going to be part of it. But it should be good. I think the qualification system needs to be adjusted. And just to address your question a little more direct, not necessarily do I think people will get shown up or called out that qualified from cherry picking, because I also think everyone cherry picks. I don't, like, go watch. You can go online. I remember watching the first weekend of the weekend league. Gorilla, #1 on the charts, highest skill rating, okay? And the best player he played against, I think he played one guy that was also in the top 100, and then from there on, he played, I think, it was like only gold. So he played, so that means he went 40 games, 40-0, and he only played one player that was top 100 or elite. That's a flawed system. And how can you say, well, doesn't he cherry picks then, right? That's a clear argument you can make.
Are you going forward? Would you, for just an average, a top 100 player to earn that spot in the top 100? How many other top 100 players do you think they should have to play against?
I think the elite top 100 should be kind of grouped together because I mean you're only separated from one win a lot of times. But I definitely think out of your 40 games, surely 10 of them should be against elite caliber players, right? Surely 25%.
Yeah,
I think that's fair.
I think within the current system, I don't see a way that it ends up working, because then what happens if you have elite players and they're playing all elite plus gold players, and then maybe they get 32 wins, and then maybe someone else that is usually top 100 under the current system might get 33 or 34 because they're losing to other top 100 people. I think the interesting idea would be to maybe have some kind of separate ranking where maybe it's the top 250 players, and then those players get grouped together and they have their own kind of weekend league in a way where they all compete against each other, and then you're having an actual leaderboard where you're seeing, okay, Rocky over this month has gone 60 and 8 against other pros, and then this pro has gone 30 and 32, so then you kind of have a different way of looking at the metrics and looking at the way that players play against each other at a similar level, because right now you're only seeing players play against each other at a similar level in 3% of their FUT Champs games, and then in Gfinity Cups and other smaller events where we're not really seeing it on a more consistent basis.
I'd welcome that, and that's another reason that we really don't know anything about rankings. People always ask me, where do you rank people? How who's the best player? Who's this?
Exactly.
Who's in the top 10?
It's impossible.
I can't give you a valid answer with any types of logistics behind it. I could tell you who won this event last year. I can tell you who wins this event this year, but does that mean that guy's the best player in the world? Not necessarily, because we don't have enough events and we don't have a clear, measurable of system that allows you to kind of be able to say, yeah, this dude was awesome this year. Damn, he did awesome every single event.
Do you think as well I know, as you said, one good example could be more events, but FIFA as a game, it is football at the end of the day. Compared to other esports where I think Colin has explained the game mechanic in the game, this thing is the best and it will always destroy this person. It's football at the end of the day. FIFA, you can have the best Ronaldo card, but there is going to be 1 or 2 chances that he won't be able to finish at the end of the day.
Okay.
And
were you making a statement? This guy's not going to always finish every chance. Okay.
No, but the point I make is I think FIFA is just, to pick the best player, I think it's too tough at the moment of time. There's so many players in the game, and that's the point I was trying to say. Sorry, it's a sport game of football. You're not always going to score every goal you get compared to a game like a Street Fighter or something like that, where that guy's going to punch and take that much power off that one. FIFA is just football in the day. Some days football doesn't go your way, and that's why I think it's so hard to try and determine each year who is the best player.
Well, there's not enough events. I mean, it's really, in my opinion, night and day. That's, if you don't have, you need events every month. You need things weekly. You need things that are happening all the time to really be able to say, yo, and really analyze, this is got to be one of the top players in the world. Look what he did for the year. All right, so let's take, Gorilla won the FIFA Interactive World Cup, right? So coming into this year, a lot of people might rank him as the top player in the world. Fair statement?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. How many events has Gorilla played this year, right now, up to this whole year of FIFA? 0.
0, yeah.
Absolutely 0. Definite 0. How many? 0. His first event will be Barcelona. How can you have a ranking system with any level of validity when you have 0 events for the #1 player in the world, arguably, over, 4 or 5 months in? September, October, we mean
5 months.
4 months, yeah.
Yeah, 4 months and some change for arguably the #1 player that has 0 events. And to me, that's a big issue in terms of building up esports, and then also, of course, having any like system of ranking. Because like if Gorilla has a bad event, let's say he has a bad event in Barcelona, and listen, Gorilla, if you're listening, I am not trying to put that on you at all. I don't, I want to make sure like I am not wishing any sort of negative vibes your way. But just hypothetically speaking, let's say he has a bad event. Does that mean that he no longer is a badass player? He's no longer an amazing player? We're going to take away his credibility? That sucks. That's so much pressure every event you go into, because there's like one event, 2 events over the whole course of a year.
Do you think a good player you can link on with that? And again, that's not saying that Agro had a bad year last year, but he had a lot of pressure on him, and it did affect him at tournaments. And he even said that he felt like he needed to deliver. He's this icon name in the FIFA esport world. He needed to perform. And do you think that was a good example of that?
Perhaps. I mean, there's just not a lot of events, and there is the random aspect of group draws. Like I remember I was at the event last year in Barcelona. Or was it Madrid? Was it Madrid? It was Madrid, I think. Right?
Yeah, Madrid.
Last year at Madrid. So I was at the Madrid event, and I definitely watched that group. August and I are very good friends. Ivan and I are good friends. So it was August, Ivan, Danny, and another Dutch pro. Man, I forgot his name. He had a great year as well. So that was their group. That was their group of 4. It's like 2 people can't come out of this group, but they're all 4 of them are capable of winning this event, in my opinion, as someone who's consuming. And it's like, or definitely all 4 are able to go far in this event. And there is that kind of random aspect, but yeah, people talk about August not necessarily getting the results that we're accustomed to seeing. I don't think he qualified for the FIFA Interactive World Cup either. And
no,
he didn't, which was like unheard of for August. But I mean, he won DreamHack easily. I don't think he conceded. If you guys remember, he didn't concede a whole goal or an entire tournament. I don't think he conceded a goal on the Xbox side. And he won the Danish Championship, I think, last year as well. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, like, he won some major events that people don't necessarily bring up because they're all focused on the one major or the 1 or 2 major events. But I don't even think he had that bad of a year, and compared to most people, it would be considered a good year. But for him, of course, you're accustomed to seeing him on a podium, always right there. There's a few guys like that. I would say at this current point, we're used to seeing Gorilla is in the running. Like, you would always could put him as a favorite. Rocky is in the running as a favorite. August is in the running as a favorite. I'm not sure if Tass is still in the running as a favorite or not, because he won that first initial event. Like, I definitely know that people are watching Tass. No doubt. They're definitely watching him. But in terms of, and Tass, I got nothing but love for you. But in terms of professional events, I've known Tass for, 5 years maybe, since he started playing at the pro scene. Last year was his best year in terms of winning a major event and doing really well and getting all this exposure online and so forth. Like, he's never been in a final before, or a top 3 or a top 4. Like, he's never been in those types of positions prior to last year. Whereas like August or Gorilla, Rocky, Bruce Granick, I feel like I'm missing a couple people that I should definitely be talking about. The German guy's been
Tim
Kai Wallen. They've been in these positions before where I've been to World Cyber Games where I've seen them win something. I've been at FIFA Interactive World Cups, they win the event, or they're right there, second, third. I've been at Electronic Sports World Cup, right there, winning the event, second, third, over and over again. So you have a certain expectation, and sometimes when you think about it, because of the game being sort of random at times, it's such an achievement that they have managed a way to win events year in and year out when there's so many people competing and the game does have that random feel.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's going to kind of take a bit of the randomness out is the format for Barcelona. So we know now the format, which is going to be Swiss system, which I was incredibly excited for because I've seen it in Counter-Strike, and I think it definitely puts a lot of teams in a position where the draw can only be so bad for you, because that first round draw is completely random, but after you lose that, then you're also going to play someone who's 0-1, and if you lose another game, then you're going to play someone who's 0-2, and it's basically win 4 games, you're through, lose 4 games, you're out. And the thing is, like, when you talk about these guys, when you talk about the Timox, when you talk about the Gorilla, and these top guys, like, they're not going to lose 4 games out of 8, I don't think. So I think it's going to really help to make sure that the best guys are actually making it through to, like, the knockouts and to the next stages, whereas the groups could be a little bit horrible, whereas they weren't really seeded last last year, which was a bit of a problem. But then again, how do you really seed those groups, you know? And so you're not going to really have those groups of death, whereas now it's just going to be Swiss system, you know, it's going to be completely random, and it's going to be based on how you are performing that event. And so you're going to be playing people that are in the same kind of form. So if you're 2-0, you're also playing someone who's 2-0. If you're 3-0, you're also playing someone who's 3-0. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it works for FIFA, but I'm really excited, and I'm really, you know, optimistic for how it's going to work.
And I agree with you. I've never seen, and I've been involved, like I said, 10 years. This system's never been used in a FIFA event, so I'm also very intrigued to see how it kind of plays out. But I think, in theory, I mean, you should see the advancement of the best players for at least for the day. You should definitely see the players. You can't say like, oh, I got a horrible group in this one.
Yep.
You know, there'll be a few people that might be unlucky and a few people that might be lucky out of this system, but overall, I think it eliminates a lot of the
excuses, you could say.
Yeah, and also the random side of actually the drawing of players, where we've always been sitting in that room, like, please pick my name or don't pick my name. That's always been what's happening, you know, because all pros know who are the favorites or have the best chance to win events, right? So when you're sitting there waiting for your name to be drawn or not drawn or whatnot, there's definite people that you would rather see right now or you'd rather see later. Like, for example, if I was at a tournament and you know, I'd rather not play August in my group. Not because I'm scared, but I know I could lose that game. I'd rather get somebody that I've never heard of if possible, or somebody that's new to the competitive scene, and play August when I get to a bracket stage. Yeah, something like, it's not that you're trying to avoid the guy, but it's like you'd rather play him when, you know, you've already warmed up, you've gotten out of your group, and you know, you get your best effort in there.
Also, what this year opens as well is for you know, a neutral coming into esports watching FIFA. You know, as Collins mentioned, if you lose 3 games, you could still go back and win 4 and get through. So that's going to be really interesting to see this year if anyone has that bad of a start. Fingers crossed.
Could see some fantastic stories.
There will be some stories. No, it'll happen. Somebody will start 1-3 or something and sneak their way back into it.
And obviously, just before we close the show, obviously we've been chatting for a really long time. It just shows, you know, how much there is to talk about esports, and I'm sure we haven't even talked about everything within the competitive scene. So we talked about the Swiss format, you know, restrictions this year, Mike. Everyone was saying, could it be a 3 icon restriction? Could it be, you know, maybe more? They've, you know, EA have come back and said there's no restrictions this year. Is that a good, bad point? You know, does it make you think about, you know, I use the weekend league team that I've got at the moment, and to be honest, a lot of the weekend league team that the guys have got, they've kind of got their dream teams, but there is, you know, there's 1 or 2 more icons that they might go for. Would you play with the team that you used to play with a weekend league, or if, you know, if you can use a 96 Ronaldo, would you go and use them?
It's a tricky debate because I've been in this position firsthand where I got to the Vancouver regional last year and I hadn't had the chance yet to play with, I think it was Team of the Year Messi. And I chose to go with my comfort of using George Best, and I regret that. I think Messi's just so much better. But that was my decision at the time. And I definitely went with the blue Ronaldo, even though I think I've been using the regular Ronaldo. I think it's easier with a player that you're using and just get the upgraded version. But I think it's a lot trickier if you're debating between 2 separate players like I had with Best versus Messi at the time. But I'm wondering what the future is going to be with esports in FIFA with restrictions or no restrictions, because I think at some point you don't want to see the exact same team over and over again. And I think at some point too, maybe you don't want to see a full icon squad, or maybe you do. And I think this is something the community has to decide. But I haven't decided, even on my own personal viewpoint, what's best. Do you want to see all blue in icons, right? Like all Team of the Year and icon squad, because that's kind of what it's going to look like for the most part. Or do you want to have it where there are some sort of integrated restrictions where it's 3 icons like we saw it? I think it was the FIFA Interactive World Cup.
The grand finals, yeah.
Yeah, they had some actual restrictions that were integrated. I just think they need to be open with what's going to happen. That's the big key. Like, be transparent with us. Let us know, do we need to train this way or train that way?
Do you think potentially as well with this year, with it there being 3 icons of a certain player, we could see maybe you're only allowed to use 3 prime icons?
It's definitely possible, and I'm just not sure where people are going to fall on the usage of icons or the usage of Team of the Year players, or just high-rated guys. Like, I don't know if it's good or bad yet to see a team full of 95+ players, or if there should be a little more limitation involved. And because we have Ultimate Team here, the world or the customization is at our fingertips. You can choose. Like EA could decide, hey, you have to have 1 bronze player, 3 silver players, and the rest can be whatever you want. Or they could say you have to have 3 regular golds. I'm not saying they would, but they could. So it is interesting to see what kind of dynamic we kind of are involved with going forward. I'd love to know what Colin thinks of this as well. What would you prefer as a restriction-based, I guess, Ultimate Team, or do you think there should be any restrictions? Do you think they should be based on the event, where it's taking place, the players that are involved?
Yeah, I think like my main thing is just to always have like the players that are available up to that point. And I think it to a point it might even be better to have it to where they're available for at least 2 or 3 weeks before the event, because I think a big problem is like just bringing in a different esport. For League of Legends, right? They wouldn't come out with a patch like 1 week before a big event or before the start of the LCS season. You know, they wouldn't do that. So I think it's kind of unfair in a way to release like a Team of the Year and have these players available essentially like a week before the players aren't really able to figure out what the meta is, because the meta in FIFA is like something really interesting where it kind of like develops like each week, you know, as we get different informs and as we get like these different players, which I think is really interesting because it adds a different dynamic of, you know, strategy and, you know, oh, are you going to use that 90 rated striker Bale, or does that striker Bale like enable you to use other players or use a different formation that maybe you couldn't use because of chemistry or because of these certain other factors that are coming into it. And I think that's what makes it really interesting. But you know, these players, you need to be able to like try them out, because, you know, you hear from pros all the time that, you know, you can't just play 5 to 10 games with a card and like know if it's okay for you, you know, because I've seen some players go into a game and, you know, for example, like I'll go into a game and I'll play like 1 game with 90 rated Ronaldo and I'll be like, nah, he's bad. And I'll play 3 games and I'll sell him on and I'll bring in someone else. Whereas like most pros, for them to really know and for them to kind of like see the patterns and learn, you know, which player makes the best runs. Like for example, like a lot of people I think are discovering Neymar now and like how insane his runs are and how aggressive he is and how, you know, fluid he is and how easy it is to dribble with him. And I think people are like, you know, the meta is constantly evolving, and it's kind of interesting too because it's like it evolves around certain players' play styles too. But when it comes to like restrictions at events, you know, like I said, I think you just need to be able to like allow the players to adjust to that meta. Because without that, then it brings in an element of randomness that I think might skew the results of the actual event. Because say a player comes in and uses that 95 Conte or 96 Conte or whatever he's rated, and he ends up being not great, you know, and the player doesn't like him, but because his stats are insane and because he looks so good, the player decided to use him, whereas he might not have made that risk if that player wasn't available or if he had the 2 or 3 weeks to try the player out beforehand. So I think there's still definitely like some perfection and some like adjusting that needs to go into it, but you know, the meta side of things is something that isn't really spoken about enough, I think, when it comes to FIFA eSports.
It's also worth mentioning a big reason that Neymar's picked up in terms of usage is because early on in the game, people didn't necessarily have icons, and you couldn't get chemistry for Neymar unless you were willing to sacrifice your squad. And then the second point that I want to bring up very quickly from what Colin was saying is when you're at a LAN event, certain players are better on a LAN connection than they would be on an online connection. And Neymar's just another good example of a player like that because he's so skillful. That you need to be good at running at people. You should be good at skill moves. You should be good at like quick touches or quick movements to maximize the potential of that individual player in FIFA and play into the meta. However, online sometimes you have a lot of delay, especially depending where you live and the types of people that you match up against, so you never get to maximize that player.
And that's where like more events comes into it, I think, and like what we were talking about in the past, because then that gives players more experience at LANs and gives them a better feel of what it really feels like to play at LAN, because it's a completely different environment than playing online, like we've said.
I couldn't agree more, because then what happens is people are so self-assured of the player choices that even if they're online, they might be struggling with this guy, they know when they get to the LAN event, nah, it'll be fine. Because I've already practiced with him now at a LAN event, 4 events in, 5 events in. I know he doesn't do his thing online, but in person, he's good.
And that's why like the smaller events, I think, come into it and add so much value, because, you know, you say Gorilla, for example, hasn't been to any events, but we've been to 3, 4, I think, so far this year already. And, you know, those types of events, whereas, you know, they're really small prize pools, maybe they're 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. Hell, we went to Lithuania, you know, and played for charity. And that was, I think, one of the most valuable events in terms of kind of learning a lot about, you know, what we needed to work on as a team and as a player for Poacher. And so, yeah, I think, you know, those smaller events where you can kind of feel that out, whereas, you know, I don't think you should be experimenting at a major. You know, I think it's a really dangerous thing to do.
I don't know if you should experiment too crazy at any of these events unless it's one of those desperation type of, I have to start moving things around. Obviously, what I'm doing is not working, but in terms of like coming in and just being like, yo, I've tried to play like this I played like this all year and it worked, and then I'm going to switch it up last minute because I'm at a LAN event or because I'm playing against this type of opponent. I think that's a really big risk. And also to touch the importance of LAN events and practice at LAN events. So this is going to show my age a little bit, but if you remember Hero and Skyla, Styla? I think it was Styla, the German twins. They won every single event for 3 years straight. One of them in FIFA. And they were like the first big sponsored athletes. They were with SK, which is a massive gaming organization, if you're not familiar. And they were Adidas athletes, which this is like, we're going way back, guys, like 2005, 2006. But one of those guys won every single event, and there was a lot of events, but the reason they won every single event, they knew tricks that other people didn't know, and they knew tricks that only worked on land. Like, I remember watching them score certain types of crosses and certain throw-ins. They were really good with certain throw-ins. This is when throw-ins mattered a little bit more, I think, than where they're currently at. In terms of, like, you could kind of set them up and do some really unique off-the-ball movement. But I just recall watching this, and I'm like, I've never seen this before. And I swear this wouldn't work online. And I went and tried online. It doesn't work online. So it's like they knew that it would work at a LAN event. And these little intricacies matter a lot. Kind of like set pieces. Right now, there's so many different ways to take set pieces currently, and you're going to see things at every single pro event. You'll see set pieces that you probably have not seen very often or never seen before, in terms of how to move players, like make runs beyond the wall, or how to set up a couple little quick passes, or something that's going to work well on a LAN, but just you might never see the real results of it or the consistency of it with an online match.
And what I'm looking forward to as well, and I'm sure you know you could relate to this as well, Mike, when you go into a tournament, of course, it is a case of tournament football. You know, you need to grind out games. You're happy to take a 1-0 win as long as you've got those 3 points on your group table. You know, was that something that you went into tournaments with? You know, you thought, I know this year's FIFA's a lot different. It's more, you know, you need to keep scoring. But you know, when you were at an event, was your mindset, I just need to keep scoring, or would I get maybe 2 goals, then sit back and try and defend?
You feel like FIFA 18 is a year that you need to keep scoring?
I believe so, especially in FUT Champions games.
Well, I was going to say, in FUT Champions, the majority of my losses, and just based on talking to people, are usually people that hold the ball really well. Like, they get a couple goals, and then you just don't see the ball because they can hold it so easily because of, like, a lack of balance, in my opinion. Like I think it's easier to pass the ball around than it is to pressure defensively. Like, especially as a unit. As a controlled unit, it's very difficult to get your midfield to go with your attackers, your defenders to go with your midfield. You know, when you're making the presses and you're trapping these triangles and so forth. At least from my experience. But I mean, ugly W is an ugly W. It doesn't matter. It's still a win. Every single event that I've been to, the guy that wins the event, whether it's myself, somebody else, or whatnot, you're gonna have games that have some luck involved, and you're gonna have games that are ugly, like you grinded the W out. You can't say you played your best FIFA, but you got it done. And
do you think we might see you at that April event?
I'd love to be there. I'll definitely be grinding a lot in February for the weekends. You never know, man. It's like one bad weekend and you're out. And I think that's something that we have to see shifted in terms of, and by bad, 36 wins. You might not be able to recover from a 36 out of 40 wins.
And an interesting point to make on that as well is on that global series, there's a last chance weekend in there. Obviously, it needs to be explained a little bit more, whether it would just be literally one weekend, play your best, so many players go through. What would you take from your November qualifier month into February? You know, you've had, obviously there's a lot of time to reflect since then. Would you feel more confident going into that February qualifier month? Or
I think the biggest mistake that I made around November would just be not preparing the team like other pros did. I didn't anticipate that competitive players and pro players would invest so much money.
Yeah.
I wasn't accustomed to seeing competitive players put $10,000 into a video game before the year started, or $5,000. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Exactly. Yeah. So I had no prereq to say this is what's going to happen. So I wasn't prepared to go up against Ronaldo teams, not Cristiano Ronaldo, like the original
R9.
Brazilian. Yeah, the R9 over and over again. I wasn't prepared to see this happening. And this game, in my opinion, also is very RNG. So the better your team, like you don't have to be a great player, but if you have an awesome team, a far superior team, you're going to get more wins. Yeah, plain and simple. Like your wins will increase because of your team increasing in terms of their value.
I'm a very much casual FUT Champs player. If I've got a full weekend to play, I will play it, and I'll play the games. And I've found that I've got quite a good team. Vieira's in there. It's not a fantastic team, but I've got some meta players, you could say. But if you come up against that 94 R9 Ronaldo, 9 times out of 10 he'll score 2-3 goals. That could be the difference between a win or a loss. And for me, it doesn't matter that much. I'm just playing for awards. But for somebody, that could be the difference between qualifying and not qualifying. Do you think it's a fair way of just if you can put more money into the game, you can get a better team, you might be able to qualify?
It's part of the current system.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I understand it as a competitive advantage. I just wish the game was a little less RNG. Like, some of the things that happen this year with bounce backs and just the ability that you could have Ruud Gullit and Vieira just chase back blindly. I have no plan, but I know these guys are going to be in my midfield. And it's effective. And I think that's the challenge from EA, trying to make a game that is consumer friendly for the casual gamer, but then also esports friendly for the competitive pro.
Which was a point we talked about before. We talked about, is the game coming to a stage now where it has to go in an esports direction, or in the way that FIFA has been prior to that?
I think you're starting to see that transition, right? Like, up until this point, and I've said this, in previous podcasts, but if you've made it this far, then I think I can say it again. It's 2 years ago, I think that esports was just the glint in the eye of EA, and it wasn't something that maybe they were just starting to think about, or maybe the groundwork had been started to lay down. But the development cycle is so short. The game's developed in, I think it's like a 2 or 3 month period in the middle of the development cycle of the previous FIFA, and so I think we're in an age where the game is starting to transition to more of an esports centric play style, and it's trying to become a bit more balanced. Whereas before, the objective was to create the most realistic simulation of football, because at the end of the day, this game's a football sim. It's not an esports title necessarily. Whereas I think now we're starting to see it maybe transition a bit more, and maybe we don't see the perfect esports FIFA title until FIFA 20, but I think it's definitely transitioning towards that direction, and I think EA is completely aware of the issues the current game has, and I think they're trying to put it in a position where it's definitely a lot more balanced than it is at the moment, because like Mike said, I think there is an RNG aspect to certain player animations and the way that the physics-based engine works compared to like other games where it's definitely a lot more reaction-based. So yeah, we'll just kind of see how it starts to develop and get a bit closer to that esports centered gameplay.
And hopefully we'll see those aspects coming in next week, Brandon, in Barcelona. I'm just excited to watch the big event, Brandon.
I think we're learning a lot, actually. Sorry, I didn't mean to just cut in. I think we're learning a lot from watching this major event in terms of styles, formations, what's working, how easy is it really to hold the ball, or maybe how difficult it is to hold the ball, or what formations work best for pressure. Just a lot of countering each other with tactics. I think it'd be good.
And obviously, big thank you for coming on, Mike, and talking. Obviously, being involved in esports for a number of time, and from all of us here at the FUT Champs podcast and all our listeners, we do wish you all the best with New York Red Bulls and that new challenge there. One question for you. I'll put you on the spot. You can give me a few players if you want. Who do you think could go and do the business at that event in Barcelona?
I'm gonna base some of my opinions or my statements here based on what I've seen online, and then also results in person. And I don't think it'll be a lot of surprises. I'm going to lean towards probably the favorites here, where the guys that I'm going to definitely be watching closely, I want to watch Gorilla because he plays in a style that I've never been able to achieve. It's not his results, but the style that he plays, where it's so aggressive, in your face. He's down 2 goals, 3 goals, doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything for him. And I just think it's really fun, and I'd love to see that being promoted as, oh, this is how you become a pro player. But good luck playing like Gorilla, because that dude's nuts. Like when you watch him play, he would be one of those guys. If he made tutorials, nobody would maybe be able to learn the game well from his tutorials, because he's so. I mean, I don't mean that in any shots or anything. He's brilliant at what he does, absolutely brilliant. But this like, no defense, slide tackles, pressure, fast play, skill move setups, and it's so enjoyable to watch from a gameplay perspective. But in terms of being able to teach that, to replicate that style, is good luck. Like there's a reason that he has success doing it, and a lot of people do not, or most people do not. So I definitely want to watch him play. Looking forward to it. I think this could be the return of August and his greatness this year. I know last year people, like you said, criticized him a little bit, saying like it wasn't an good enough year for August, basically. I think that he signed with Hashtag. He has a lot of comfort there. These are some of his good friends in the community, and I think that was important for August. And he has like a very true team now backing him. And I think he wants to represent his sponsors well and all his endorsements. And I'm expecting him to definitely put on a show and to be, I would say, back to the August that we are accustomed to seeing. Nice. Shells has been okay. I'll stop.
No, sorry, I didn't know. Carry on.
I was gonna say Shells has been another. I wasn't sure if he was gonna be like kind of a one-off guy, because last year I knew nothing about him. I don't know about you guys, but that was the first that I'd ever seen this guy in terms of tournaments or even hearing about him in the online community, and he was brilliant. He really should have won the final, versus Rocky, and he's one clearance away, and it's too bad. I know that he doesn't want us to keep talking about that, but this year, online, I think he went 40-0, 10 weekends in a row or something.
I think he was. I think he was about I want to say 198-0 at one point.
Yeah. So I mean, he's definitely gifted. So I'd love to see if he can put together really another great year, or some big results at a tournament. But I'd say those 3 guys I'm really watching. I'm curious to see what Tass is going to do. I like many. I think Tass is one of those guys that's I think he could put up more results that are good, and I'm just really curious to see what he's kind of put together this year, because games change, the meta changes, as Colin was talking about, and certain meta plays into different styles of gameplay and how well you adapt. Like, I know that I'm a structured FIFA player. And what I mean by structured is that I look at the game from a logical standpoint. I'm going to build up in a logical way. I have a game plan. I react to what people are doing. And then there's people that are, and there's not a lot of them, but there's YOLO players, or the opposite of structure, which would be like someone similar to a huge Gorilla. When I watch his stuff, I was like, oh my God, that's such a mistake he's making there. But he's kind of challenging you to take advantage of his mistake. Are you able to do it? If not, I got it. You see, like, he puts you in that position where you're going to feel this pressure, and if you see it, cool, you get a goal. But if you don't, I'm going to take it away from you right now. And you don't see that much at the pro level. It's something you see plenty online, but you just don't see it at the pro tournament level nearly as much, at least in my opinion. But it should be good. I'd like to see how Chris does. I think there's going to be a lot of different players that are going to be on the watch list, from both the North America or the Americas division, and then a ton of Europeans that I think are capable of winning an event.
I think it was. I'm glad you picked up Chris, because I think he was probably the most unlucky player at all last year. I think he got to 3 finals in 3 different majors and didn't come out on top in any. So maybe those negatives last year, doesn't want to go through that again this year, so maybe he could perform. I think somebody who he's feared among a lot of pros. He's Megabit. I'll be interested to see. How
Oh
he
yeah,
performs online.
maybe I didn't even mention it. My bad, man. I think Germany and Germans and the UK and France, those three nations are where I would say the most players are coming out of. I know there's also been a big following in some of the Scandinavian countries, mainly Sweden and Denmark in terms of, I think people looking up to Ivan are looking up to August, kind of how people looked up to Bruce Granick, and that's where the French scene started. And there's a lot of quality players. Like even the second best player, the third best player, the fourth best player from those countries have the ability to win the event.
Yeah, I just want to see it all take place now next weekend, Brandon.
Most definitely, and I'm glad you highlighted Megabit there, a player that I think is feared by many. And you got to remember as well, hashtag Ryan out on his first outing as part of hashtag United after leaving Excel after a good year for him as well last year. And there's just so many new faces as well that are coming into this tournament as part of the 128 players, which I'm really looking forward to seeing. Of course, Colin's player Poach is going to be there. Woo! And I'm sure he'll be right behind him as well. But we're going to wrap it up there for this week, the FUT Champs podcast. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Be sure to drop a like on the YouTube video. Make sure you subscribe. Of course, go follow us on Twitter at FUT Champs Podcast. Big thank you, Mike, for coming on. Mike LaBelle from New York Red Bulls. Just signed there. Will be part of that eMLS project as well. And hopefully he'll get himself qualified for the April event. Colin, thank you, as always, for coming on, being our extra pundit in the show. And, of course, that man, Richard Buckley, next to me. I've been Brandon Smith. Enjoy Weekend League this week. Enjoy the Barcelona event next week. Hopefully there'll be a big winner there. And we'll catch you next time. Goodbye.
If you like what you're hearing, why not subscribe? Just go to @FUT Champions Pod on Twitter, drop a follow, and then you'll find all your subscription options in the pinned tweet. Oh, and also, while I've got you, why not check out this podcast's more casual older brother, the FUT Weekly Podcast, for in-depth reviews, Team of the Week rundown, content chat, and general FUT discussion.